Welcome back to the Deep Dive, and today, well, if you ever sent an email you immediately regretted.
Or, watched a simple disagreement online just spiral into a total flame war.
Exactly. Then you know exactly what we're getting into today. It's a topic that is painfully relevant.
It is. We are cracking open a document that's nearly 2,000 years old, but it honestly feels like a guide for managing our modern lives, especially the power of our words.
So what's our source material for this deep dive?
We are going straight into the heart of early Christian counsel. It's a focused look at the letter of James, specifically chapter 3.
And our mission?
It's to pull out these practical core insights on spiritual maturity and self-control, particularly how we use our speech.
I have read it. The imagery is incredible.
It's some of the most vivid in the entire Christian Greek scriptures. He likens the tongue to a tiny rudder that can steer your destiny and also a consuming fire.
Okay, so let's set the stage a little. Who is this James and who is he talking to?
So this is James, the half-brother of Jesus. And he held a position of, enormous responsibility. He was a prominent overseer in the early Christian congregation.
He's writing from Jerusalem.
Likely, yeah. Around 62 CE. And he's addressing his audience as my brothers, so we know he's speaking to fellow Christians.
But it's not just a friendly letter.
No, not at all. He is actively intervening. He's trying to correct a really serious issue that was developing, this spirit of bitter jealousy and contentiousness.
So real messy human conflict.
Exactly. He's dealing with a genuine problem poisoning their fellowship.
Okay, let's unpack this then. James. He doesn't ease into it. He starts with a pretty stark caution, especially for people who want to be leaders.
He absolutely does. There's no gentle intro. He puts the weight of responsibility front and center in verse 1. He says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we will receive heavier judgment."
Heavier judgment. That sounds less like an invitation and more like a serious warning.
It is. The insight here is that teaching carries a higher accountability before Jehovah God. Because a leader's words, they don't just affect them, they shape the lives of many others.
Right. It's an immediate gravity check.
Yeah.
But then he connects that high standard to a struggle that everyone faces.
Yes, and that connection is so key. He includes himself. In verse 2, he says, "For we all stumble many times."
So even this prominent overseer is admitting his own imperfection.
He is. But right after that, he gives us the single ultimate test of spiritual maturity. He says the one who controls their speech is a perfect man, able to bridle also his whole body.
So wait, the ability to control your tongue isn't just one good quality among many. James is arguing it's the spiritual litmus test.
That's the claim. If you have mastered your words, you've essentially mastered yourself entirely.
That's a massive claim.
It is. And he spends the next few verses proving it, showing how the smallest thing can direct the largest force.
And this is where it gets really interesting because the analogies he uses are so practical, so vivid. He starts with control and discipline.
Right. He wants to show that direction is about control, not about size. First up is the horse bridle in verse 3, a tiny piece of metal in a horse's mouth.
And it lets you guide the whole animal.
The whole body. And then he moves to the ship analogy, which is just so potent, it speaks to destiny, to these huge uncontrollable forces.
Right. Tell us about that one.
Verse 4, he says, "Look also at ships. Although they are so big and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the man at the helm is inclined to go."
Wow. Just think about that visual. This massive ship in a storm pushed by the wind.
And its entire direction depends on the intention of the person holding that tiny rudder.
So the application for you, the listener, is crystal clear. Your words, they are the rudder. Self-control is about directing your whole life.
Exactly. If we let our impulsive emotional words, those strong winds, take over, we're headed for a crash. But small, consistent acts of restraint keep us on course.
Every word we choose is like a slight turn of that rudder.
It is. It guides the whole vessel of our life.
Which sets up this powerful contrast. Because if the bridle and the rudder are about control, his next illustration, it's about pure destruction.
A total shift from guidance to catastrophe. This is the fire analogy. He says in verses 5 and 6, "See how small a fire it takes to set a great forest ablaze? The tongue is also a fire."
And the smallness is the key, isn't it? One tiny spark, a piece of gossip, a careless insult.
And it can destroy something vast that took years to build. A marriage, a reputation, and it's so hard to put out once it starts.
He also stresses the damage to the speaker themselves.
Oh, absolutely. He says the tongue defiles all the body and sets the whole course of life on fire. And then this part is so crucial. and it is set on fire by Gehenna.
Okay, we need to unpack that phrase. Set on fire by Gehenna. What does that mean for the listener?
In this context, Gehenna represents complete, irreversible destruction, the final consequence of opposing God's standards.
So it's not just a mistake.
No. By saying the tongue is set on fire by Gehenna, James is saying that when we use speech to defile or slander, the source of that speech is fundamentally destructive. It puts you on a path to spiritual ruin.
It really frames our words as having, well, eternal consequences.
It does. And then right after this, he points out this ultimate irony of the human condition.
This is the humility check.
The ultimate humility check, yeah. Verse 8. He says humans can tame every kind of wild animal and bird. We can control the animal kingdom.
But the tongue.
But the tongue. No human can tame the tongue. It is unruly and injurious, full of deadly poison.
So controlling our speech is harder than taming a lion.
Because the problem is inside us. It requires something more than just human willpower.
And that lack of control leads him right into the issue of hypocrisy within the congregation of Christians.
This is where he really applies the pressure on their integrity. The paradox he points out in verses 9 and 10 is just stunning.
What does he say?
He says, with it we praise Jehovah the Father, and yet with it we curse men who have come into existence in the likeness of God. Out of the same mouth come blessing and cursing.
I think that's one of the most powerful points here. Cursing another person isn't just rude, it's a direct insult to the Creator.
Because that person is made in God's likeness. You're praising the artist while spitting on his masterpiece. Jehovah despises that inconsistency. It makes our worship feel hollow.
And he uses more nature analogies to drive this home.
He does. He says this duality is unnatural. A spring can't produce both fresh and bitter water. A fig tree can't grow olives. The universe runs on consistency.
So this all leads to a really important question, right?
Yeah.
If their hearts were full of bitter jealousy and they were producing this inconsistent speech, where was it coming from?
That's the pivotal question, and the solution is to examine the source. This is where he contrasts earthly wisdom with wisdom from above.
So let's start with the problem, the worldly conflict. What are the signs of this earthly wisdom?
James nails the core issue in verse 14. Bitter jealousy and contentiousness in your hearts. Notice it starts in your hearts. It's an internal motivation.
And the label he gives this wisdom is just devastating.
It is. In verse 15, he calls the source earthly, animalistic, demonic.
Whoa. That's a harsh triad of words. Earthly, I get. Focused on ego, on winning. But animalistic and demonic, what does he mean by that?
Well, animalistic suggests it's a wisdom driven by base instinct, like an animal fighting for territory. There's no moral reasoning, just impulse and self-interest.
Okay.
And demonic means it's sourced from a spirit that's opposed to divine order, conflict, disorder. That's the natural product of that kind of thinking.
So, and our motivation is just to win an argument, to be right. That wisdom is coming from the basement, not from heaven.
And the result is always chaos. Verse 16 says, wherever those traits exist, there will also be disorder and every vile thing.
So if that's the toxic source, what's the solution? What does this heavenly wisdom look like?
He gives the perfect antidote in verse 17. He lists 9 qualities of the wisdom from above. It is, first of all, pure, then peaceable, reasonable, ready to obey, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial, not hypocritical.
Purity comes first. The motives have to be clean.
Exactly. No hidden agenda, no jealousy.
I think reasonable and impartial seem critical for fixing the original problem. What do those mean in practice?
Being reasonable means you're willing to yield, to listen, to accept you might not have all the answers. It's the opposite of that rigid pride.
And impartial.
It means treating everyone fairly, no favoritism, no biased gossip. These qualities really define the behavioral standards for citizens of God's kingdom. It's a theme that runs all through the Christian Greek scriptures.
So if you, the listener, are facing some kind of friction at home, at work, online, James is basically giving you a filter test from verse 17.
That is a perfect way to put it. Before you reply, before you hit send, you run your words through that filter. Is this pure? Is it peaceable? Is it full of mercy?
And if the answer is no,
then that speech comes from that earthly, animalistic, demonic source. And the wisest thing to do is remain silent.
So the final outcome of applying all this is, well, peace.
Yes. The last verse, verse 18, ties it all together. Moreover, the fruit of righteousness is sown in peaceful conditions for those who are making peace. You don't just stumble into spiritual maturity.
You cultivate it by being a peacemaker.
Not an argument winner.
That brings it all home for you, the learner. The takeaways are so powerful. Your tongue is the litmus test for your entire self, and you need to constantly use that 9-point filter test before you use the rudder of your speech.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. Think about the profound humility of James himself. He was a pillar of the early congregation, a leader.
Right.
And yet he deliberately includes himself in the struggle. He wrote, "For we all stumble many times."
I'm not putting himself above it.
Not at all. So if even a mature spiritual leader like him felt the need for this strong counsel and for his own self-correction, what does that teach us about the lifelong need for vigilance over our own words?
That's a sobering thought.
It is. Perhaps the moment we think we've finally mastered our tongue is the very moment we're most in danger of setting a great forest ablaze.
A truly profound thought to end on. A reminder that this is a constant universal struggle. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it helps steer your course toward peace. Until next time, keep learning.